When a quiet 12-year-old black boy walked into his new school, the teachers whispered behind his back. They called him the military brat. They mocked his uniform, laughed at his accent, and told him he'd never fit in. He stayed silent, even when his homeroom teacher humiliated him in front of the whole class. But what they didn't know was that this boy's mother wasn't just any parent. She was a 4-star U.S. general, a woman who led thousands of soldiers and had fought for her country's honor. And when she found out how her son was treated, she didn't send an email. She walked straight into that school. What happened next shocked every teacher, every student, and turned that entire school upside down. Stay till the end, because this story will leave you speechless and remind you why respect must be earned, not demanded. You're watching Brainfuel, the channel that brings real, powerful, life-changing stories that spark your mind and touch your heart. If you love stories that inspire courage, justice, and redemption, hit that like button, subscribe, and stay tuned, because today's story will remind you that one brave stand can change an entire world. The school hallway buzzed with the usual chaos of a Monday morning. Lockers slamming, sneakers squeaking, voices rising in laughter and gossip. But when Marcus Johnson stepped through the double doors of Jefferson Middle School, the noise seemed to fade into an eerie hush. It was like the air shifted. All eyes turned toward him. Marcus clutched his backpack straps tighter. He'd felt this before, the weight of stares, the silent judgment that followed him everywhere he went. Being the new kid was nothing new, but there was something different about the way they were looking at him this time. A whisper cut through the hallway. "Hey, that's the military kid, right?" Another voice replied, "Yeah, his mom's some Army officer or something." And then came a low chuckle. "Figures. Probably thinks he's better than us." Marcus didn't respond. He'd learned long ago that silence was safer than confrontation. He kept his head down, walking steadily toward his first class. The sound of laughter echoed behind him, and though he pretended not to hear it, every word stuck like a thorn. This was his 6th school in 4 years. Each time his mother, General Alicia Johnson, was transferred to a new base, Marcus had to start over. New town, new faces, new people who didn't understand his life. And every time, he told himself this one would be different. This one, he'd make friends. This one, people would see him for who he was, not just as the military kid. But as he walked past the hallway posters and trophy cases, hope started to fade. The walls were filled with team photos, smiling faces of kids who looked like they belonged. Football players with their arms draped over each other's shoulders, science fair winners holding certificates, cheerleaders flashing perfect grins. Marcus didn't see himself anywhere in those frames. He felt like a ghost wandering through someone else's world. When he reached his classroom, he paused at the door. A tall, thin teacher with sharp eyes and a colder smile stood by the whiteboard. Her nameplate read, Mrs. Parker. "Ah, you must be Marcus," she said, her tone polite but distant. "The new student." "Yes, ma'am," Marcus said softly. "Take a seat wherever you find space. And do try to keep up. We're a little ahead of the standard curriculum here." Her words had that extra edge to them, the kind that carried more meaning than they seemed to. Marcus nodded and slipped quietly into an empty seat at the back of the room. As he unpacked his notebook, he could feel eyes on him. 2 kids in the front row leaned toward each other and whispered. A girl turned around, gave him a once-over, then snickered to her friend. Marcus tried to focus on the board, but it was impossible to ignore the whispers. "Why does he talk like that? I heard his mom's never home. Military brat. Bet he thinks he's tough." The words hit him harder than he wanted to admit. He wasn't tough, not really. Sure, he'd learned to be strong on the outside, but on the inside, he was just a kid who missed home, even though home was a word that kept changing every few months. Mrs. Parker began the lesson, but her tone carried the same chill as the whispers. "Now, class," she said, writing equations on the board. "Let's see if everyone can solve this, even our new student." Marcus froze. She looked directly at him. "Marcus, why don't you come up and show us how to solve this one?" His stomach dropped. He hadn't even opened his notebook yet. I'm not sure we covered that topic at my last school," he said hesitantly. Mrs. Parker raised an eyebrow. "Oh, I see. Well, I suppose discipline isn't exactly a strong suit everywhere. The class erupted in quiet laughter. Marcus felt his face burn. He wanted to disappear. He wanted to run out of the room and never come back. But instead, he just sat there, staring at the board while Mrs. Parker moved on as if nothing had happened. That was his first lesson at Jefferson Middle School, not in math, but in humiliation. When the bell rang, Marcus waited until everyone else had left before packing up. He didn't want anyone behind him. As he walked out, he heard Mrs. Parker say softly, but just loud enough for him to catch, "Let's hope he adjusts. We can't have the class slowing down." Adjust. That was the word they always used. Teachers, principals, counselors, everyone said it. He just needs to adjust. As if it was his fault that he was different. The hallway outside was emptier now, but he could still hear faint laughter from the corner where a few boys were gathered. They were pointing at him. One of them mimicked a marching soldier, saluting dramatically. "Yes, sir. Right away, sir," he mocked. Marcus didn't respond. He just kept walking, but every step felt heavier. He reached his locker, twisted the handle, and let the door clang open. Inside, he taped a small photo, one of him and his mom, both smiling wide, her arm wrapped around him, her uniform gleaming under the sun. It was taken the day she earned her 4-star, one of the proudest moments of her life. He stared at the photo for a moment. That smile, her confidence, her strength, it reminded him why he kept going. His mom always said, "People who don't understand your story will always judge your cover, son. But never let them write your ending." He took a deep breath and whispered to himself, "You got this, Marcus. Just one more new school. One more time." But deep down, a small voice whispered back, "What if it's not just another school? What if this time it's worse?" And as he shut his locker, that doubt clung to him like a shadow he couldn't shake. Because what Marcus didn't know yet was that the people who were supposed to protect him, his teachers, were about to become his worst bullies. The next morning, Marcus woke up before his alarm. His stomach already hurt, not from hunger, but from the heavy dread that came with going back to Jefferson Middle School. The memory of yesterday clung to him like wet clothes. The whispers, the stares, the humiliation in front of everyone when Mrs. Parker called him out. It replayed over and over in his mind. He stared at the photo of his mom on his desk. Her smile strong, her shoulders squared in her military uniform. He whispered, "I'll be fine, Mom," even though he wasn't sure he would. He packed his books, double-checked his homework, and walked out quietly. When Marcus entered the classroom that morning, Mrs. Parker didn't even glance up from her papers. The chatter around him died down as the other students noticed him. A boy from the back whispered to his friend, "Hey, look, the soldier kid's back." Another smirked. Maybe he'll salute the teacher today. Marcus took a deep breath and sat down. He opened his notebook, determined to stay invisible. But Mrs. Parker had other plans. "All right, class," she said sharply, tapping her pen against the desk. "Before we begin, I'd like to welcome Marcus back. Hopefully, he's had time to adjust and come prepared today." A few students snickered. Marcus forced a small smile and nodded. She continued, "Yesterday, we discovered that not everyone is up to speed with Jefferson's academic standards. So, let's see if today brings improvement." Marcus's stomach twisted. He stared at his notebook, hoping she'd move on, but she didn't. "Marcus," she said suddenly, "why don't you stand up and read question number 5 from your assignment?" Marcus hesitated. His voice was quiet. "I didn't finish number 5, ma'am. I wasn't sure how to." Mrs. Parker's eyebrow arched. "You weren't sure? I see. Well, perhaps in your old school they didn't expect much. But here, we hold our students accountable." The classroom fell silent. The words felt heavier than they sounded. Then she added, "Your mother's in the military, isn't she?" Marcus looked up, startled. "Yes, ma'am." Mrs. Parker smiled, but it wasn't kind. Well, one would think discipline runs in the family. A ripple of laughter swept across the room. Marcus froze. His cheeks burned, and he wished the ground would just open up and swallow him whole. He wanted to say something, to defend himself or his mom, but the words caught in his throat. He sat down slowly, trying to hide his shaking hands under the desk. Mrs. Parker didn't stop. Let's move on. Perhaps someone else can show us what focus looks like. She looked around the class. Anyone? A girl named Samantha, who always seemed eager to please, raised her hand. I can, Mrs. Parker. Wonderful, said the teacher with a pointed glance toward Marcus. See, Marcus? That's what preparedness looks like. Samantha solved the problem correctly, earning praise. Meanwhile, Marcus sank lower in his seat. He couldn't understand it. What had he done wrong? He was quiet, respectful, and he always tried to do his best. But somehow, that wasn't enough here. During recess, he sat alone under the oak tree behind the school. The chatter of kids playing tag, the sound of bouncing basketballs, and bursts of laughter all surrounded him, but it felt like another world. He took out his notebook and drew small sketches. Tanks, helicopters, his mom saluting. It was the only thing that calmed him. But even there, peace didn't last. A voice interrupted. Hey, soldier boy. What's that? Battle plans. Marcus looked up to see 3 boys standing over him. The one in the middle, Jake, smirked. My dad says people in the Army are just order followers. They don't think for themselves, Jake said, kicking at the dirt near Marcus's shoes. Marcus clenched his pencil tighter, but stayed quiet. Another boy added, Yeah, and his mom probably yells at him every morning like a drill sergeant. Stand straight, Marcus. Drop and give me 20. They all laughed. Marcus's throat tightened. He blinked hard to stop tears from forming. He refused to give them that satisfaction. Jake crouched down and whispered, You know what, soldier boy? You don't belong here. Go back to whatever base you came from. Then they walked off, still laughing. Marcus looked down at his drawing. The helicopter he just sketched had smudged, a fingerprint where his hand had trembled. He tore the page out and crumpled it. When he returned to class, Mrs. Parker was waiting. Marcus, she said, arms crossed. Late again. Care to explain why? I was just... Excuses, she cut him off. This isn't boot camp, young man. Punctuality matters here. The class laughed softly again. It was becoming routine now. She said something cruel. They laughed, and Marcus sank a little deeper inside himself. Now, Mrs. Parker said, holding up a stack of graded quizzes. I'm handing these back. I must say, I'm disappointed in some of you. And Marcus, she paused dramatically as she placed his paper face down on his desk. You have a lot to learn if you want to keep up here. Marcus flipped it over. A red D stared back at him. He bit his lip. He'd studied so hard the night before, trying to prove himself. But it didn't matter. Nothing he did was enough. Mrs. Parker moved on with the lesson, acting as if she hadn't just broken a kid's spirit in front of the entire class. When the final bell rang, Marcus stayed behind. He mustered the courage to approach her desk. Mrs. Parker, he said quietly, I'm trying my best. I just need a little time to catch up. We move a lot, and every school's been different. Mrs. Parker didn't even look up. Then perhaps you should try harder. Marcus, life doesn't wait for anyone, even army brats. Her tone was sharp, dismissive. Marcus felt something twist in his chest. Please don't call me that, he said softly. Her eyes snapped up. Excuse me. He took a step back, shaking his head. Nothing, ma'am. She gave a cold smile. Good. Let's keep it that way. Marcus turned and walked out of the room, his fists clenched so tight that his nails dug into his palms. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows on the school courtyard. Marcus stood there for a moment, breathing hard. He'd been humiliated, insulted, and made into a joke by someone who was supposed to help him learn. He thought of his mom again, how she always said, respect isn't demanded. It's earned through how you treat people. But here at Jefferson Middle School, respect seemed like a foreign language. He looked back at the building, the windows glowing orange in the sunset, and whispered, You'll see, Mrs. Parker. You'll all see who my mom really is. He didn't know it yet, but those words would soon echo through the entire school. Because the day his mother walked through those same doors, everything would change. Lunch bell. To most students, it was the best sound of the day. a break from classes, a chance to laugh with friends, share jokes, and trade snacks. But to Marcus Johnson, it was the loneliest sound in the world. As the bell rang, kids rushed to the hallways like a flood, shouting, laughing, teasing. Marcus followed slowly, clutching his lunch tray with both hands. He had packed his own lunch that morning, a simple sandwich, apple slices, and a juice box, because he didn't want to stand in the cafeteria line where everyone stared. The cafeteria was huge and loud. The smell of pizza and fries mixed with the buzz of hundreds of voices bouncing off the walls. Tables were packed with groups, athletes on one side, cheerleaders near the middle, and the quiet kids huddled by the far wall. Marcus scanned the room for an empty seat. There was one open spot near the end of the table where 3 boys were sitting. He recognized one of them, Jake, the same boy who had mocked him yesterday. Marcus hesitated. Maybe Jake wouldn't notice him. Maybe today would be different. He took a breath and walked toward the table. "Hey," Marcus said quietly, setting his tray down. "Mind if I sit here?" Jake looked up from his fries, smirking. Actually, that seat's taken." Marcus blinked. "Oh, by who?" Jake's friend snorted. "By invisible people, obviously." The boys burst into laughter. Marcus stood frozen, his tray still in his hands. Jake leaned back, pretending to think. "Unless, of course, you want to sit on the floor. Soldier boy. That might remind you of boot camp." More laughter. Marcus forced a small smile, pretending it didn't bother him. "It's okay," he said softly. "I'll find somewhere else." He turned away, tried to hide the sting in his eyes. He finally found an empty table in the corner, next to the vending machines, the kind of place people only sat when no other seats were available. The hum of the machines was loud, but at least it drowned out the noise of the cafeteria. He sat down and quietly opened his lunchbox. All around him, conversation swirled. "Did you see the new TikTok challenge? My mom's picking me up early. I swear Mrs. Parker hates me." Marcus took a bite of his sandwich. It tasted dry, not because of the bread, but because of the lump in his throat. He could feel eyes glancing at him, people whispering. A group of girls at the next table leaned toward each other and giggled. One of them said, "He's that army kid, right? My brother said his mom's like a big deal or something." "Then why is he such a loser?" another girl said, rolling her eyes. Marcus lowered his head. He'd learned long ago that sometimes being invisible was better than being noticed. A deep voice interrupted his thoughts. "You okay, kid?" Marcus looked up. Standing next to him was Mr. Willis, the cafeteria aide, a heavy-set man in his 50s with tired eyes and a clipboard in his hand. "Yes, sir," Marcus said quickly. Mr. Willis frowned. "You sitting here alone?" Marcus shrugged. "Yeah, just easier that way." The man gave a half smile. "You'll get used to it, kid. Every school's rough in the beginning." He walked off before Marcus could say anything. The words echoed in his head. "You'll get used to it." But why should he have to get used to it? Why was it normal to feel alone? He picked at his apple slices, not really hungry anymore. His thoughts wandered to his mom, General Alicia Johnson. Somewhere halfway across the world, leading soldiers, commanding respect, standing tall in a world where her voice mattered. She'd told him before she left, "No matter where you are, son, stand with pride. You're a Johnson, and Johnsons never bow to ignorance." He wanted to believe that, but right now it felt impossible. Because here, pride only made him a bigger target. The cafeteria doors suddenly opened, and laughter grew louder. A group of older students walked in late. 8th graders. One of them pointed toward Marcus's table and laughed. "Yo, check out the soldier boy," he shouted. Everyone turned. Marcus's stomach dropped. Jake saw the opportunity. He cupped his hands around his mouth and yelled, "Hey, Marcus, should we salute you or something?" The whole cafeteria erupted in laughter. Even a few teachers supervising the room looked over, but didn't say anything. Marcus sat frozen, every muscle in his body tense. He could feel hundreds of eyes on him. Every second felt like an hour. He wanted to disappear. Then something unexpected happened. A small voice from a nearby table spoke up. "Leave him alone." Everyone turned. It was Emily, a quiet girl with glasses who sat in the front row during math class. Her hands were shaking a little, but she didn't look away. Jake frowned. "What did you say?" "I said," she repeated, louder this time, "leave him alone." For a brief moment, the cafeteria went silent. Then Jake laughed. "Relax, Emily. We're just joking." "It's not funny," she said, her voice trembling. "You're being mean." Jake rolled his eyes. "Whatever." He grabbed his tray and walked off, muttering to his friends. Emily looked over at Marcus and gave a small, kind smile. "You don't have to sit alone every day, you know." Marcus managed a faint smile. "Thanks," he said quietly. For the first time that day, the heaviness in his chest lifted, even if just a little. After lunch, as students filed out of the cafeteria, Marcus lingered behind, throwing away his untouched sandwich. Mr. Willis passed by again. "Everything good, kid?" he asked casually. Marcus nodded. "Yeah, I guess so." Mr. Willis didn't notice the sadness behind his voice. "Good. Keep your head up. School gets easier once you find your crowd." Marcus forced a smile. "Right." But deep down, he knew it wouldn't be that simple. Because the problem wasn't the crowd. It was the way people saw him before they even knew him. That night, Marcus sat by his window, staring at the stars. Somewhere under that same sky, his mom was probably awake too, maybe leading her unit through another long night. He picked up his phone and hesitated. Should he tell her? Would she worry? He didn't want to distract her from her duty. She was doing something important. But the words came out anyway, barely a whisper. "Mom, they don't like me here." He typed the message and stared at it for a moment before hitting send. Seconds later, the typing bubble appeared. Then her reply. "People who fear difference will always try to break it. But you, my son, are built to stand strong. I'll be home soon. I promise." Marcus smiled faintly. His mom always knew what to say. He didn't realize it yet. But that single message would soon spark a chain of events that would turn the entire school upside down. Because when General Alicia Johnson came home, Jefferson Middle School would never be the same again. The night after that miserable lunch, Marcus lay on his bed staring at the ceiling, his room dimly lit by the small lamp on his desk. The quietness of the house was suffocating. No laughter, no background TV, no clatter of dishes. Just silence. It was a kind of silence that made every thought sound louder. Every cruel word from school replayed in his head. Mrs. Parker's cold smirk, Jake's mocking salute, the laughter of classmates that echoed long after the bell had rung. He turned on his side and stared at his phone. A part of him wanted to call his mom. The other part told him not to. She was thousands of miles away, deployed overseas. He knew she was busy, commanding hundreds of soldiers, making life-and-death decisions every single day. Compared to that, his problems felt small, almost childish. He didn't want to distract her. She'd always said, "When I'm away, I need you to be strong for both of us." But tonight, being strong felt impossible. He opened their text thread and scrolled through old messages. Her daily good mornings, her pictures in uniform, the heart emoji she always sent before missions. He smiled weakly, then sighed. Finally, he hit the call button. It rang 3 times before the line clicked, and a calm but commanding voice came through. "Marcus? Everything okay, baby?" Her tone instantly made his throat tighten. No matter how strong she was still Mom. "Yeah," he said, trying to sound casual. "I just wanted to hear your voice." She smiled to the phone. He could hear it. "I'm glad you called. How's the new school? Making friends?" Marcus hesitated. The silence on his end stretched too long. "Marcus," she said softly, "talk to me." He swallowed hard. "It's fine. Just different." A pause. Then her tone shifted. Lower, gentler. "What happened?" He exhaled slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. "They don't like me, Mom. Not the kids, not even the teachers." "What do you mean?" "They call me names. Laugh at me. The teacher embarrasses me in front of everyone, and the principal doesn't care." There was a long silence on the line, not an empty one, but heavy. He could almost picture her face, the way her jaw would tighten, her eyes narrowing as she listened carefully. Then she said, in that strong, measured voice of hers, "Tell me exactly what they did." Marcus hesitated, but she didn't let him off the hook. "Marcus, I need the truth." So he told her everything. How Mrs. Parker mocked him for not knowing a lesson he'd never been taught. How Jake called him soldier boy. How everyone laughed when the teacher said discipline doesn't run in the family. And how he'd been sitting alone every day at lunch. When he finished, there was silence again. For a few seconds, all he could hear was a faint hum of radio chatter from wherever she was calling. Then she said quietly, "Marcus, listen to me." He waited. "You have nothing to be ashamed of. The problem isn't you. It's them. People fear what they don't understand. And sometimes they take that fear and turn it into cruelty." He sniffed softly. "But it hurts, Mom, every day." "I know," she said gently. "And I wish I could be there right now. But I promise you this. I will be there soon. And when I come, they will understand exactly who they're dealing with." There was something in her tone, calm but unshakably firm. Like she wasn't just making a promise to him. She was making a declaration to the world. Marcus wiped his eyes. "It's not just that they make fun of me. It's how they look at me. Like I don't belong. Like I shouldn't be proud of you." She inhaled deeply. "Marcus, look at me." He smiled faintly. "I can't, Mom. It's a phone call." That made her chuckle softly, breaking the tension for a second. "Then imagine me, okay? Standing right in front of you." He nodded, even though she couldn't see it. "I've spent my life fighting for this country, Marcus. But every day, I fight another battle, one most people don't see. The battle of being seen, respected, and treated as equal. You may be young, but you're already fighting that same battle, just in a different form." Her voice softened. "And that doesn't make you weak. It makes you brave." Marcus swallowed hard. "Sometimes it doesn't feel like bravery. It just feels like pain." "I know, but bravery isn't about not feeling pain. It's about standing tall despite it. You come from a line of people who never give up, even when the world tries to push them down. You hear me?" He nodded again. "Yes, ma'am." "Good," she said firmly. "Now, tomorrow when you walk into that school, I want you to keep your head high. Don't let them steal your dignity. Not with their words, not with their looks, not with their silence. You hold your pride like armor." Marcus smiled faintly. "Like a soldier?" "Exactly," she said, her voice warm again. "Because that's what you are in your own way." For the next few minutes, they talked about little things, his favorite class, science, his drawings, the small tree he planted in their backyard before she left. Then her tone shifted back to business. "Marcus, I'll be stateside in a few weeks. I'll make a visit to your school myself." His eyes widened. "Wait, you mean?" "Oh, yes," she said with a hint of steel in her voice. "If these teachers think they can bully my son, they're about to learn a lesson in discipline and respect." Marcus laughed, quietly for the first time in days. "They won't see it coming." "I know they won't," she replied. "Now, promise me you'll hang in there until I get back. Can you do that for me?" He nodded again, tears threatening to fall. "I can. That's my boy," she said proudly. "And Marcus, yeah, I'm proud of you. No matter what happens at that school, don't ever forget that." After they hung up, Marcus sat in silence, staring at his phone screen, at her name glowing softly in the dark. He replayed her words in his mind like a song he didn't want to end. He wasn't alone anymore. He wasn't powerless. And somewhere far away, his mother, the woman who'd faced war zones and military politics, was now preparing for a very different kind of battle. He didn't know exactly when she'd come home. He didn't know what she'd do. But deep down, he knew one thing for sure. When General Elisha Johnson walked through the doors of Jefferson Middle School, the people who made him feel small would regret every cruel word they'd ever said. And that night, for the first time since he'd started at that school, Marcus fell asleep smiling. Not because his problems were gone, but because hope had finally returned. The next morning, Marcus walked into school holding his backpack tightly. His mother's words from a night before still echoed in his mind. "Hold your pride like armor." He tried. He really did. But sometimes, no amount of armor could protect you from an ambush you didn't see coming. As soon as he stepped into class, the atmosphere felt different. Whispery laughter buzzed around the room. Jake and his group of friends snickered as he passed by, pretending to salute him mockingly again. "Attention, soldier," Jake said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Where's your mommy's tank today?" The class erupted in laughter. Even Mrs. Parker didn't stop them. She just smirked, tapping her red pen against the desk as if enjoying the performance. Marcus clenched his jaw and took a seat quietly, staring down at his notebook. He wanted to disappear. "All right, everyone," Mrs. Parker said sharply. "Settle down. We'll start with our history presentations." Marcus's heart sank. He had almost forgotten. Today was presentation day. Each student had been assigned a topic on American wars. Marcus had chosen the role of African American soldiers in history. He'd worked hard on it, staying up late to write his notes. It wasn't just a school assignment. It was personal. His mom had told him stories of brave black soldiers who fought even when they weren't treated as equals. Men and women who served their country, even when their country didn't always serve them back. But as he looked at Mrs. Parker's cold eyes, he knew this wasn't going to be fair. "Marcus," she said suddenly, "you'll go first." He froze. "Me?" "Yes, you," she said with that same icy tone. "Since you seem to come from a military family, I'm sure you'll have lots to say." The way she emphasized that last part made the class giggle again. Marcus stood slowly, his legs trembling. He carried his poster board to the front and turned toward the class. He took a deep breath. "You can do this," he whispered to himself. At first, his voice was shaky. But as he started talking about the Buffalo Soldiers, the Tuskegee Airmen, and the black women nurses of World War II, he began to gain confidence. His voice grew stronger, his words more alive. Some students even stopped laughing and started listening, until Mrs. Parker interrupted. "Marcus," she said sharply, "where did you get this information?" He blinked. "From books and my mom's old notes. She's..." Mrs. Parker cut him off. "Are you sure you didn't just make some of this up?" The class giggled again. Marcus frowned. "No, ma'am. It's real history." She raised an eyebrow. "Oh, really? Because I don't recall learning about these so-called heroes in any of our textbooks. Maybe your mother's stories are confusing you." The room went dead silent. Marcus's chest tightened. "She's a general, ma'am. She knows about this stuff." Mrs. Parker smirked. "A general? My, isn't that convenient?" She turned to the class. "Everyone, did you hear that? Marcus's mother is a 4-star general." The way she said it dripped with sarcasm. The class burst into laughter again. Jake pretended to march like a soldier. "Yes, sir. General Mommy, sir." Even Mrs. Parker chuckled. All right, settle down." She turned back to Marcus, her voice soft but cutting. "Sweetheart, we all have dreams about our parents being something special. But let's stick to facts, shall we?" Marcus's throat tightened. "She is a general," he said, voice cracking. Mrs. Parker crossed her arms. "Enough, Marcus. Don't make this worse for yourself." He stood there frozen, tears welling up in his eyes. Then she did something that crossed every line. "Class," she said with a smug smile, "since Marcus's mother is apparently a 4-star general, maybe he can demonstrate some military discipline for us. Marcus, why don't you give us a salute?" The laughter exploded again. Marcus's hand shook. "Please, ma'am." "Go on," she pressed, tapping her desk. "Show us how it's done. Stand tall like a good soldier boy." Something inside him broke. He stared at her, eyes wet, then turned to look at his classmates, their mocking faces, their laughter echoing through the room. He wanted to run, but his mother's words echoed in his mind again. "Don't let them steal your dignity." So he stood tall, shoulders back, chin up. He raised his hand slowly and gave the most precise salute he could muster, steady, silent, and filled with quiet defiance. For a brief moment, the laughter died. Something about the way he did it, the pride in his small frame, the calm in his trembling body, made even the bullies stop. But Mrs. Parker ruined it with one last jab. You can sit down now, Private Pretend. The class roared again. Marcus lowered his hand and walked back to his desk, face burning. He sat down, staring at his paper, trying to hide the tears streaming down his cheeks. Jake leaned over and whispered, "Bet your mommy's proud now, huh?" He didn't reply. He just clenched his fists under the table, nails digging into his palms. At lunch, things got even worse. Someone had taken a picture of him saluting and turned it into a meme, captioned, "Private Pretend reporting for duty, Mommy's Army." The image spread to the school like wildfire. By the time he reached the cafeteria, kids were whispering, pointing, and laughing. He grabbed his tray and walked to the corner table, head down. A girl he'd never talked to before, named Mia, sat across from him quietly. "Hey," she said softly, "that wasn't cool what they did." He looked up, surprised. "You saw that?" She nodded. "Everyone did. And Mrs. Parker shouldn't have said that stuff." He shrugged. "It's whatever." But she could see it in his eyes. It wasn't whatever. It hurt deeply. "You know," Mia said, "my dad was in the Navy. People used to make fun of me, too. Said my dad left because he didn't care. They don't understand what military families go through." Marcus looked at her, and for the first time, he didn't feel completely alone. Still, he knew things were only going to get worse before they got better, because by the end of the day, the meme had reached the school staff email chain, and even the principal had seen it. And instead of stopping it, he laughed. That night, Marcus didn't eat dinner. He sat in his room, staring at the meme on his phone until his vision blurred. He didn't cry this time. He just stared, emotionless. He whispered softly, "Mom's coming soon." And though no one could hear him, it wasn't a wish anymore. It was a promise. Because when she arrived, Jefferson Middle School would never forget the name General Alicia Johnson. 3 days later, a storm gathered, not in the sky, but inside Jefferson Middle School. It began like any other Monday morning. Students shuffled through the halls, chattering and laughing. Marcus moved quietly among them, eyes fixed on the floor, his backpack hanging loosely from one shoulder. The mocking whispers followed him everywhere. "Hey, Private Pretend. Salute, soldier boy. Where's your 4-star mommy?" He ignored them, just like his mother told him to. But deep down, the humiliation still stung. Every step he took felt heavier. Mrs. Parker was already in class, sipping her coffee and grading papers. When Marcus walked in, she gave him a faint, smug smile. "Good morning, Private," she said mockingly. Marcus didn't respond. He just sat down quietly. The day dragged on painfully. Every tick of the classroom clock felt like an eternity. Then, right after lunch, the loudspeaker crackled. "Attention, all staff and students. We will be having an unscheduled visit this afternoon. Teachers, please remain in your classrooms until further notice." The students exchanged confused glances. Unscheduled visits were rare. Usually only inspectors or district officials came unannounced. Mrs. Parker straightened in her chair, fixing her hair quickly. "Probably some education board nonsense," she muttered. Marcus said nothing, but something inside him stirred, a flicker of hope. At exactly 1:15 p.m., the sound of heavy black SUVs pulling into the school parking lot drew attention from every window. Curious students pressed against the glass to see what was happening. Out of the first SUV stepped a woman in full military uniform, polished black boots, crisp olive green jacket lined with medals, and a stern expression that demanded respect before she even spoke a word. Her nameplate read, "General Alicia Johnson." Gasps spread to the hallway as teachers and students alike peered through the windows. The principal, Mr. Harris, rushed to the entrance, trying to compose himself as he adjusted his tie. He had no idea who she was or why she was there, but the sight of a 4-star general walking up the front steps made him instantly nervous. The doors opened. Her boots clicked sharply against the polished floors as she entered, flanked by 2 officers. Her presence filled the space, not with intimidation, but with authority. You could feel it. "Good afternoon," she said in a calm, commanding voice. "I'm General Alicia Johnson. I believe this is Jefferson Middle School." "Yes, ma'am," the principal said quickly, extending a trembling hand. "Welcome, General." To what do we owe the honor of your visit? She looked him straight in the eye. I'm here regarding a matter involving my son, Marcus Johnson. The principal froze. His smile faltered. Why your son? Yes, she replied evenly. I understand he's a student here. And I also understand that the school, under your leadership, has failed him spectacularly. The hallway went completely silent. A few students had gathered near the doors, watching wide-eyed. Even teachers peeked out of their classrooms. The principal stammered, I'm not sure what you've heard, General, but I assure you, we treat all our students with respect, she interrupted sharply. Is that what you call public humiliation, racial targeting, and staff-enabled bullying? Her words cut through the air like a blade. The principal's face flushed red. Now, General, I'm sure this is all a misunderstanding. She stepped closer. Oh, it's not. I have the screenshots, the emails, and the recordings. My son didn't tell me everything right away, but when he did, I made sure to verify every single word. She reached into her uniform pocket and pulled out a small folder. Inside this is a full report, with dates, names, and incidents. Would you like me to read them aloud, or shall we discuss this privately? The principal swallowed hard. Perhaps we should speak in my office. Good idea, she said coolly. And while we do that, I'd like Mrs. Parker present as well. At the mention of her name, Mrs. Parker, who had been standing in the hallway pretending not to listen, turned pale. Inside the principal's office, tension thickened the air. Mrs. Parker sat stiffly in her chair, avoiding eye contact. General Johnson sat across from her, hands folded neatly on the desk, her uniform perfectly pressed. Every move she made was controlled, deliberate. Mrs. Parker, the general began calmly, I'm told you singled out my son repeatedly, mocked his family background, and encouraged other students to do the same. Is that accurate? Mrs. Parker swallowed. General, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I was merely, trying to discipline him. The general leaned forward slightly. By calling him private pretend? By forcing him to salute in front of class? Mrs. Parker's mouth opened, but no words came out. General Johnson's voice hardened. My son is 12 years old. He's endured more changes, more relocations, and more loneliness than most adults could handle. Because of my service. You don't get to mock that. Mrs. Parker fidgeted nervously. I didn't mean any harm. The general cut her off sharply. Intent doesn't erase damage. You humiliated him in front of his peers. You turned his pride into shame. Tell me, Mrs. Parker, would you have done that if his father were standing here in uniform instead of me? The room went still. The principal cleared his throat nervously. General, I'm sure we can come to some sort of... She turned to him. You had multiple reports of bullying and ignored them. You laughed at a meme circulating about my child, one mocking his service family. Do you deny it? Mr. Harris froze. I suggest, she said coldly, you choose your words very carefully. He said nothing. Then she stood. Here's what's going to happen. Her voice dropped lower, commanding. Mrs. Parker will issue a formal written apology to my son and to this class, effective immediately. She will also be reported to the district superintendent for disciplinary review. Mrs. Parker's face drained of color. General, please. The general didn't flinch. And you, Principal Harris, will ensure the school implements an anti-bullying and cultural sensitivity program within the next month. I will personally follow up. She turned toward the door, then stopped. Oh, and one more thing. She looked back at both of them. The next time you see a child standing alone, struggling, and you decide to look away, remember today, because the next parent you humiliate might not just be a soldier's mother. It might be me again. With that, she walked out. Outside the office, dozens of students stood frozen, whispering. The sight of Marcus's mother, a real four-star general. Walking through the hallway was like something out of a movie. Marcus himself stood near his locker, eyes wide. When she saw him, her expression softened immediately. Hey, soldier, she said with a small smile. He ran to her and hugged her tightly. Mom, you're really here. She held him close, whispering, "Always." The entire hallway watched silently. Even Jake, the loudest bully, looked down at his shoes, ashamed. Mrs. Parker emerged from the office moments later, pale and trembling. For once, she didn't have a single thing to say. And as General Johnson and her son walked out of the building hand in hand, every student and teacher in that hallway knew one thing for certain. They had just witnessed what true power, discipline, and love looked like, not in the form of punishment, but in justice. The next morning, the entire school felt different. For the first time in months, whispers weren't about Marcus. They were about his mother. Everyone had seen her. The 4-star general who had marched into Jefferson Middle like a storm in uniform, speaking with the authority of someone who could command nations, and the heart of a mother who would defend her child at any cost. The story spread faster than any meme ever could. "Did you see her boots?" She called out the principal. "She's a real general, like 4 stars. Students who once laughed at Marcus now looked at him differently. There was no mockery in their eyes anymore, just quiet respect and maybe a touch of fear. Even teachers who had ignored him before suddenly went out of their way to greet him in the hallway. "Good morning, Marcus," they'd say, a little too politely. But Marcus wasn't focused on any of that. His mind was on what his mom had told him last night before she left. "I'll make sure they apologize," she'd said calmly, standing by the window of his room. He'd looked at her nervously. "Mom, you don't have to do all that." She smiled faintly. "Oh, but I do. Because this isn't just about you, Marcus. It's about every kid who's ever been made to feel small when they did nothing wrong." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Tomorrow morning, you hold your head high, because you've already won." Now, as he walked into the school auditorium, those words echoed in his head. The entire school had been called in for an assembly. No one knew exactly what it was about, but everyone suspected. Rows of students filled the seats. Teachers lined the back walls, whispering nervously. The principal sat up on stage, shifting uncomfortably in his chair, and beside him, pale and stiff, sat Mrs. Parker. The principal cleared his throat into the microphone. "Good morning, students," he began awkwardly. "We've called this assembly today to address some incidents that have taken place recently, which do not reflect the values of Jefferson Middle School." He adjusted his glasses, sweat glistening at his temples. "It has come to our attention that certain staff and students have engaged in behavior that goes against our code of respect and equality. And for that, we are here to make amends." The room buzzed with murmurs. Then he gestured toward Mrs. Parker. Mrs. Parker would like to say a few words. She stood slowly, her hands trembling slightly as she took the microphone. For the first time, she didn't look like the confident, sharp-tongued teacher Marcus had always known. She looked smaller, humbled. "Good morning," she began quietly. "I want to speak today about a mistake. A very serious mistake that I made." The room went silent. Her eyes scanned the crowd until they landed on Marcus, sitting in the 3rd row. Their eyes met, and she took a deep breath. "Marcus," she said, her voice trembling, "I owe you an apology. I said things and did things that were unkind, unfair, and deeply wrong. I mocked you when I should have encouraged you. I let other students humiliate you when I should have defended you. I forgot what my job really was, to build confidence, not destroy it." A few students looked at Marcus. His face was calm, unreadable. Mrs. Parker's voice cracked slightly. "I was wrong about you, about your family, about what it means to serve. When your mother came here yesterday, she reminded me what real discipline, real strength, and real leadership look like. I disrespected that, and for that, I am deeply sorry." She swallowed hard and lowered her gaze. "You didn't deserve what I did, and I hope someday you can forgive me." There was a long, heavy silence. No one laughed. No one whispered. Even the usual troublemakers sat still, eyes fixed on the floor. The principal took the microphone again. His voice wavered slightly. "I would also like to extend an apology," he said. "Not just to Marcus, but to every student who has ever felt unheard in this school. I failed to take action when I should have. I let personal bias cloud my judgment. And for that, I am also truly sorry." He looked directly at Marcus. "You showed more courage than most adults do, young man. And I want to thank you for reminding all of us what integrity looks like." The auditorium was silent. Then, slowly, someone started clapping. It was Mia, the girl who had defended Marcus in the cafeteria. Her small applause echoed in the still air. Then another student joined in. Then another. Within seconds, the entire auditorium erupted into applause, loud, sincere, and echoing through the walls. Mrs. Parker's eyes filled with tears. The principal looked down, clearly emotional, and Marcus, sitting there in the third row, felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not just relief, not just vindication. Pride. Real, steady pride. After the assembly, students approached him, awkward at first, unsure of what to say. "Hey, Marcus, I'm sorry, man. Yeah, we were jerks. Your mom's awesome, by the way." He smiled faintly. "Yeah, she kinda is." Even Jake, the ringleader of the bullying, walked up, shuffling his feet nervously. Dude, I just wanted to say, I was wrong. I shouldn't have made fun of you." Marcus studied him for a second, then simply nodded. "Thanks." No anger, no revenge, just quiet forgiveness. Because Marcus had learned something powerful. Strength wasn't about fighting back with fists or words. It was about rising above. Later that day, the school board announced new programs for cultural awareness and anti-bullying initiatives, just as General Johnson had demanded. Posters went up around campus promoting kindness and inclusion, and on one of those posters, in bold letters, it read, "Respect is earned by how you treat others, not by how loud you are." That became Jefferson Middle's new motto. When Marcus got home that evening, his mom was waiting for him on the porch, sipping tea in her casual uniform. "So," she asked, smiling, "how'd it go?" He grinned. "They apologized." She raised an eyebrow. "Did they mean it?" He nodded. "Yeah, I think they did." She smiled proudly. "Good. Then we can both move on." He hesitated. "Mom, thanks for everything. For coming. For standing up for me." She reached over and ruffled his hair. "That's what moms do, soldier." He chuckled softly. "You think they'll ever forget you?" She laughed. "Oh, I don't think they'll ever forget us." They both looked up at the sunset, its orange glow spilling across the yard. For once, the world felt right again. And somewhere deep down, Marcus knew this was more than just an apology day. It was the day he stopped feeling small. The day he realized that dignity, respect, and courage weren't just words. They were choices. And he had chosen to stand tall. The week after the assembly, something incredible began to happen at Jefferson Middle School. It didn't happen overnight. Change never does. But it began quietly, in small moments, small shifts that slowly added up to something bigger. For the first time since Marcus had joined, the hallways didn't echo with laughter at his expense. The whispers were gone. The stares softened. And where there used to be smirks, there were now nods, some apologetic, some respectful. The same students who once mocked him now held the doors open for him, asked him to join group projects, and even sat with him at lunch. It wasn't just about fear of his mother. It was about realization. They had seen what true courage looked like. And for many, it made them question their own actions. Marcus, however, didn't let the attention go to his head. He was polite, humble, and focused. The same quiet, determined boy he had always been. But inside, something had changed. The shy, insecure kid who used to walk with his head down was gone. Now, when he walked to the hallways, he walked taller. His eyes met others without hesitation. He didn't shrink anymore. He was still Marcus, but a stronger, prouder version of himself. In class, the difference was even more visible. After the incident, Mrs. Parker had been given one more chance by the district, under close supervision. She returned to class looking tired, older somehow, like the weight of guilt still lingered on her shoulders. Marcus didn't hate her. He'd seen her apology, and though it couldn't erase the past, it had felt genuine. One morning, as she handed back graded essays, she stopped by Marcus's desk. "Marcus," she said softly, placing his paper face down. He looked up. Yes, ma'am. I just want to say, she began, choosing her words carefully, your essay on leadership through service, it was exceptional. One of the best I've ever read. He blinked in surprise. Thank you. She nodded. You have a gift for words. And for strength. I hope you never stop using either. For a moment, their eyes met, and something like understanding passed between them. It wasn't friendship, not yet, but it was respect. Outside of class, Marcus found new confidence, too. He joined the debate club, something he'd never have done before. Standing in front of an audience no longer scared him. He spoke clearly, passionately, about fairness, courage, and justice. Other students began to notice. They weren't just hearing Marcus anymore. They were listening. Mia, the girl who'd once stood up for him, became one of his closest friends. They would sit on a big oak tree during lunch and talk about everything. School, dreams, their parents' jobs, and what they want to do when they grew up. I think you can be someone big one day, Mia said one afternoon. Marcus smiled shyly. Nah, I just want to make a difference. She grinned. That's exactly what someone big would say. Meanwhile, Mrs. Parker's transformation was perhaps the most surprising of all. She started attending workshops on cultural sensitivity and equality. Not because she was forced to, but because she wanted to learn. She began using her own mistakes as lessons. One day, she told her class, I learned something important recently. Respect isn't just a rule, it's a responsibility. You don't wait to give it to people you think deserve it. You give it first. Her students listened closely because they all knew what she was talking about. And quietly, Marcus smiled to himself. Change wasn't about punishment. It was about reflection. And she was living proof of that. The principal, too, had changed. Mr. Harris introduced a new program called Stand Tall, a weekly meeting where students could share stories, talk about challenges, and support one another. Marcus was invited to be the first speaker. He hesitated at first. I don't know if I can talk in front of everyone. But his mom's words echoed in his mind. Bravery isn't about not feeling pain. It's about standing tall despite it. So he agreed. When the day came, the entire auditorium filled again, the same one where he'd once been humiliated and later vindicated. Now he stood at the front, not as a victim, but as a voice. He looked at the crowd, rows of faces curious, expectant. He took a deep breath. A few weeks ago, he began, I used to think being different was something to hide. I thought if I just stayed quiet, things would get better. But silence doesn't fix things. It only gives bullies more power. He paused, scanning the audience. When people made fun of my mom or where I came from, I thought I should just take it. But then I realized something. The reason my mom wears her uniform isn't just to look strong. It's to protect people who can't protect themselves. And I think we can all do that in our own way. The room was silent. Marcus smiled faintly. You don't need medals or stars to be brave. You just have to stand up for yourself and for someone else. The applause that followed wasn't loud or chaotic this time. It was warm, steady, real. After the assembly, the principal patted Marcus on the shoulder. You've done more for the school than any adult here, son, he said quietly. You reminded us what leadership really looks like. Marcus just smiled. My mom says leadership means doing the right thing, even when no one's watching. Mr. Harris chuckled softly. Then you're already a better leader than most of us. That night, Marcus sat by his window, gazing at the stars. His mom had already returned to her base, but they still called every evening. When she picked up, her voice was warm. Hey, soldier, how was your day? He grinned. Pretty great. I gave a speech. Yeah, she said proudly. How'd it go? They clapped, he said with a laugh. And I didn't even cry this time. She chuckled. I'm proud of you, Marcus. You didn't just stand tall. You helped others do the same. He looked up at the night sky. I think things are better now. People are different. She smiled softly through the line. You'd be surprised how much the world can change when one person refuses to stay silent. Marcus nodded. You think they'll remember what happened? Of course, she said, but not for the reasons you think. They'll remember it because you turned pain into purpose. That's what real strength looks like. As the call ended, Marcus sat in silence, feeling something peaceful inside him. He thought about everything: the laughter, the humiliation, the courage, and the justice that followed. He realized now that his story wasn't just about what others had done to him. It was about who he had chosen to become because of it. And for the first time, he didn't see himself as a boy who was bullied. He saw himself as a leader, the kind who didn't need stars on his shoulders to make a difference. Just heart and courage. The day began like any other, a golden morning sun spilling over the school courtyard, laughter echoing in the halls, sneakers squeaking against the tile floor. For Marcus, it was just another ordinary day, or so he thought. He didn't know that this would be the day everything came full circle. It had been several months since the confrontation that changed everything. The bullying had stopped, the teachers had grown softer, and the entire school seemed to breathe a new kind of air, one filled with respect, understanding, and quiet pride. But there was still one person Marcus hadn't seen since that life-changing day: his mom, General Alicia Johnson. She had returned to duty shortly after setting things right at the school. Since then, their calls had been brief, their messages short but full of love. She always told him she was proud. He always promised to make her prouder. And that morning, he woke up with her words in his head, the same one she'd said before she left. You carry more power in your heart than any uniform can show. At school, the day was normal. English class, lunch with Mia, a debate club meeting. Marcus was preparing for a small presentation about leadership. He didn't know there would be a surprise audience waiting for him. By afternoon, the auditorium filled with students, teachers, and parents for the school's annual Leadership and Service Day. It was a new tradition Principal Harris had started, inspired in part by Marcus's story. Posters lined the walls with quotes about courage and kindness. There was even one that said, "Stand tall, because your voice matters." Marcus smiled when he saw it. He didn't know the principal had used his words. As the event began, different students took turns on stage, reading poems, giving speeches, performing short skits about respect and teamwork. Then, Principal Harris stepped forward and spoke into the microphone. "Today," he said, "we celebrate not just academic excellence, but character, the kind that inspires others. And there's one student here who embodies that spirit more than anyone I know." Marcus looked up from his seat, slightly confused. "Marcus Johnson," the principal continued, smiling warmly. "Please join me on stage." The room erupted in applause. Mia nudged him. "Go on, hero." Marcus stood, heart racing, and walked toward the stage. He wasn't expecting this. As he climbed the steps, Principal Harris shook his hand. "Marcus," he said, "you've shown us what leadership truly means. Your strength changed the school for the better. And today, we want to honor that." He turned to the audience. "But before we do, there's someone special who want to be here to see this moment." The doors at the back of the auditorium opened. For a second, the light from outside blinded everyone, and then she walked in. General Alicia Johnson, in her crisp, decorated uniform, her medals gleaming under the lights. The entire room fell silent, just like the first time she'd been there. But this time, it wasn't fear that filled the air. It was admiration. Every student, every teacher, every parent. They all stood up and began to applaud. The sound was thunderous, echoing across the room. Marcus froze for a heartbeat, his eyes wide. Then his face broke into the biggest smile of his life. "Mom!" he whispered under his breath. She walked down the aisle with that calm, confident stride only a leader like her could have. But when she reached the stage, her expression softened completely. She opened her arms. "Come here, soldier." Marcus ran into her embrace. The crowd clapped even louder. Some people even wiped away tears. When they finally stepped apart, the general turned to the audience, smiling. "Thank you for welcoming me," she said, her voice steady yet warm. "I wasn't sure I'd make it home in time for this, but there was no way I was missing my son's big day." The crowd laughed softly. She turned to Marcus. "You've grown, haven't you?" He shrugged shyly. "A little." She looked around the hall. "I've heard so much about how this school has changed, how you changed. It takes courage to lead, but it takes even greater courage to forgive. And my son taught me that. The audience hung on to every word. After the speeches ended, the principal presented Marcus with a small plaque. It read, "Marcus Johnson for inspiring leadership, integrity, and courage." Mrs. Parker, who had once been the source of his pain, stood in the front row. Her eyes shimmered with pride as she clapped for him. After the ceremony, she approached both Marcus and his mother. "General Johnson," she said softly, "I can't thank you enough. And Marcus, I'm proud of you. You've changed me more than you'll ever know." The general gave her a kind smile. "The fact that you can admit that means you've already changed. Growth isn't weakness, it's strength." Mrs. Parker nodded, her voice trembling slightly. "I'll remember that." Later that afternoon, the general and Marcus walked together through the empty courtyard, the same place where, months ago, he'd once sat alone at lunch. Now, kids waved him as they passed. Teachers smiled. There was no loneliness left here. "I can't believe this place," his mom said. "It's different." "Yeah," Marcus said, kicking at a pebble. "Everyone's different now. Even me." She looked down at him, her eyes full of pride. "Especially you." They sat on a bench, watching the golden light fade into evening. "You know," she said, "when I first came here, I was ready for a fight. I thought I had to teach people a lesson. But you taught them something far more powerful." Marcus frowned curiously. "What do you mean?" "You didn't fight back with anger. You led with grace. You showed strength through kindness. That's a lesson even adults forget sometimes." He smiled softly. "You taught me that, Mom." She chuckled. "Maybe, but you reminded me of it." Before they left, Marcus asked to take one last look at the auditorium. It was empty now, quiet and peaceful. But on the stage, his plaque glimmered under a beam of fading sunlight. His mom put a hand on his shoulder. "You know what this means, right?" He nodded. "That I stood tall." She smiled. "Exactly." As they walked out of the building, the janitor held the door open and said with a grin, "Proud of you, young man. You made the school better." Marcus blushed. "Thank you, sir." The general gave a small nod. "He made me better, too." They stepped out into the evening air. The flag above the school fluttered gently, catching the last rays of sunlight. And as they walked toward the parking lot, Marcus glanced back one last time. That building, once filled with cruelty and pain, now felt like a symbol of something else entirely. Change, redemption, respect. That night, as they sat together at dinner, Marcus asked quietly, "Mom, you think people can really change for good?" She looked at him, smiling gently. "If you lead them by example, yes. Change doesn't start with power, Marcus. It starts with heart." He nodded thoughtfully, and for the first time in a long while, he felt at peace. His story, their story, had come full circle. He wasn't just a boy who was bullied anymore. He was a boy who stood tall and helped everyone else learn how to do the same. The next morning, the sun rose softly over Jefferson Middle School. A new day, calm, golden, and full of quiet promise. Marcus walked down the familiar path toward the school gates, his backpack slung over one shoulder. But today, he wasn't nervous. He wasn't bracing himself for whispers or laughter. For the first time since he'd arrived, he felt like he belonged. Students waved to him from across the courtyard. Teachers smiled warmly as he passed. Even the security guard at the entrance saluted playfully. "Morning, General Jr." The guard joked with a grin. Marcus laughed. "Morning, sir." It wasn't mockery anymore. It was respect. Real, earned respect. As he entered class, Mrs. Parker stood by the whiteboard, erasing yesterday's notes. She turned when she saw him. "Good morning, Marcus," she said, her tone soft, genuine. "Good morning, ma'am," he replied politely. There was still something in her eyes, a mix of humility and remorse, but also pride. After the bell rang, she cleared her throat and faced the class. "Before we start today, I want to say something." The room quieted immediately. She looked straight at Marcus. "You all know what happened a few months ago. I wasn't fair to a student who deserved better. I judged before I understood. And that was wrong. She paused, taking a slow breath. Marcus, you showed more strength and grace than I ever have. You taught me what leadership really means. Not rank, not authority, but respect. Marcus blinked, caught off guard. The class stared at him, too. Mrs. Parker continued, her voice trembling slightly. I hope you can forgive me, and I hope the rest of you learn from my mistake. Kindness isn't weakness. It's the highest form of strength. The room stayed silent for a long moment, then filled with gentle applause. Marcus nodded slowly, a small smile tugging at his lips. I forgave you a long time ago, ma'am, he said softly. Mrs. Parker smiled back. You're a better person than most adults I know. At lunch, Marcus sat under the big oak tree, the same one where he'd once eaten alone. Now the bench was full. Mia sat beside him, and a few kids from the debate club joined in. They laughed, shared snacks, and talked about everything from grades to their favorite movies. Hey, Marcus, one of them said, you think your mom will come to next year's assembly too? He grinned. If she's not saving the world, maybe. Everyone laughed. It was a small thing, just kids sharing lunch, but to Marcus, it felt like the greatest victory of all. Later that afternoon, the principal called him to the office again. But this time, there was no fear, no anxiety. When Marcus stepped in, Principal Harris smiled warmly. Relax, son. This isn't trouble. He gestured toward the desk where a small framed certificate Saturday. This came in today, a letter from the superintendent. The district heard about what you and your mother did here. They're starting a program across all schools called Stand Tall, inspired by your story. Marcus's eyes widened. Really, the principal said proudly. It'll teach students and teachers about empathy, respect, and how to handle bullying. You've made a real difference. Marcus smiled, his chest swelling with pride. I just wanted people to be kind. The principal nodded. And that's exactly what leaders do. They start small, but their message grows. That evening, Marcus sat by the window, staring at the sky that was painted in orange and pink hues. He missed his mom already, but he knew she was out there, making the world better, just like she said he could. He picked up his phone and texted her. Hey, Mom, guess what? The school made a program called Stand Tall. They said it's because of me. A few moments later, her reply came. Because of you? No, son, because of who you chose to be. He smiled, reading it twice. Then he whispered softly to himself, because of who I chose to be. Days turned into weeks, and life at Jefferson Middle continued. But it was never the same. The hallways were brighter, the classrooms warmer. Students helped each other instead of tearing each other down. Even teachers began to look out for kids who seemed lost or quiet, remembering Marcus's story as a reminder of how much their words mattered. And Marcus, he became something of a quiet legend, not because he wanted fame, but because he had changed the culture of the entire school through humility and heart. One day, during a school assembly, Mrs. Parker surprised him again. She stepped onto the stage holding a small, wrapped box. Marcus, she said, this is for you. He walked up curious and opened it carefully. Inside was a silver pen, engraved with the words, Write your own destiny. She smiled. You use your voice to change lives, Marcus. Keep using it. You're going to go far. He looked down at the pen, emotion swelling in his chest. Thank you, ma'am, he said softly. And for the first time, she replied, No, Marcus, thank you. That night, after dinner, Marcus sat in his room and pulled out a notebook. On the first page, he wrote, Leadership isn't about being in charge. It's about lifting others up. Then below that, he started writing a story, his story, about the teachers, the bullies, the pain, the courage, the forgiveness, and his mother's powerful visit. He wanted people to read it, not for sympathy, but for strength, because he knew there were other kids out there, lonely, misunderstood, and quiet, who needed to know that they could stand tall too. The next morning, as he walked to school, he saw the flag waving high above the building, the same flag his mother saluted every day before duty. He stopped for a moment, watching it flutter in the wind. Then he whispered under his breath, I'll make you proud, Mom. And deep down, he knew she already was. Weeks later, A letter arrived at their home, sealed with the school district's emblem. When Marcus opened it, his hand shook slightly. It read, "We are honored to inform you that Marcus Johnson has been selected as the Regional Youth Ambassador for the Stand Tall program. His story will be shared across the state to inspire kindness and courage in schools everywhere." He stared at the letter in disbelief, then ran to show his mom over a video call. She laughed proudly. "Looks like the student became the teacher." Marcus smiled. "Guess I learned from the best." Months passed, and his story spread far beyond his school. News outlets covered it, and people across the country shared it online. But Marcus never let the fame get to him. He stayed humble, grounded, just like his mom taught him. He knew the real reward wasn't attention. It was a change he had sparked in others. The teachers who now listened, the students who now stood up for each other, the classrooms that now felt safe. That was a true victory. One night, as he lay in bed, he remembered everything that had happened. The fear, the pain, the humiliation, the redemption. And he realized something powerful. The world hadn't just changed for him. It had changed because of him. He smiled to himself, whispering softly into the dark, "Stand tall no matter what." Outside, the flag swayed gently in the night breeze, a silent salute to the boy who turned pain into power and left behind a lesson that no one at Jefferson Middle would ever forget.